React Roundtable. Today we have an exciting episode for all our React enthusiasts. We will be discussing very advanced topics of React, including higher order components, render props, hooks, React Suspense, and the concurrent mode. Today we have two esteemed speakers, Anurag Singh and Nischit Shetty, and they will be discussing in deep about all these topics that I mentioned. So I will like to give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Shreya, for having me here. I would love to talk about React and share my knowledge on that.
Absolutely thrilled to be a part of the show, Shreya.
So let's get started. Let's start discussing with higher order components and render props. Both of these patterns have been widely used previously for sharing data between the components. So Anurag, what is your take on the higher order components?
Yes, so higher order components are a very good approach to share common functionality, common logic between different components. So let's say even not only logic, if we have some properties that we need to share to different components, we can use higher order components. So higher order components are just functions which take a React component as an argument and they add some extra functionalities or properties to it and then return that enhanced version of that component that we can use. In that, we will have share logic, share properties, and higher order components are very common in class-based components. And there is a very good example of with router component that we used to use in React router. So when we pass any component in with router component, then it will return a new component which will have location details, history details of the routing part. So that's how we can use higher order components. And in functional components, we have other methods that we will discuss for sharing logic when we will discuss about functional components and hooks. So yeah, that is higher order component. And also one thing I forgot, these are very favorite questions of interviewers.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
they like to ask higher order components and examples of higher order components. So it is a very good thing to understand and know.
Yeah, actually, higher order components is basically is in the integral part of the basics of React. That's why it is one of the important topics for the interview, right?
Yes, actually, that is a like very fundamental of sharing logic and very fundamental pattern we can call pattern for sharing logic. So that is why it is asked in every interviews.
So how do they compare to the React render props?
So actually in render props, see in higher order components, we pass a function like a component. We
Right.
pass a component,
As an
React
argument.
component as an argument, and we will pass inside a function, which function is called higher order component, and that function inside it will have all the common sharing functionality. But in render props, we pass a prop as a function. We pass a function as a prop. So in that function will decide what is inside that will render.
Yeah. So what happens in render props, right?
Mhm.
So as Anurag explained, so we are passing a function over there.
Yeah.
Now, as we are passing a function to the component, the rendering logic or whatever would happen inside it would be left to the function itself. Okay, so let me explain it maybe in pizza terms. So, for example, if you have a pizza factory, right? You want to create pizzas, but you need to have just one machine for it. You cannot create multiple machines for each and every pizza type, right?
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
create one machine and you provide the input and so on. So similarly, let's say the machine is a component that and we are passing the type of pizza, maybe pepperoni pizza to it. So we can define a function that fetches all the ingredients, then
Based on the
creates
type.
yeah a pizza. Let's say in case of pepperoni pizza, a simple pizza would be passed, and whatever the pepperoni is there, maybe we can also pack the pizza and these sort of things that would be done inside the component, right? But the logic for doing that, what set of instructions should be there, all this would be passed in the function that we are passing to it. So this way our pizza would be done, and that is how render props work over there.
So are there any cons of these both React patterns? Like any cons for higher order components or render props?
Yeah. One of the cons that I think of, is that there would be prop drilling sort of thing. So let's say if you have a component that is icon related, what you're basically doing is that in this icon, let's say the icon that you're passing, you are passing an SVG component. Okay, this would go inside the container, okay, of the icon. Then you would need to maybe pass inside, if there is a higher order component inside it, you will be passing once again the component to the internal container, and so on. So this might create a sort of prop drilling in case of higher order component. And also render props, it can similarly happen, as in you're passing the function for maybe a tooltip. Okay, the rendering logic, if for example, if you want to display that, okay, when I hover over the tooltip, that should something happen over there. So in this case, you will be passing to the initially to the container, and then so on to the icon over there, right? So this sort of creates a prop drilling. I think that is one of the cons that we face with regards to these things.
A prop drilling might be a jargon for some of our audience. So can you explain what prop drilling exactly is?
Yeah. So prop drilling is basically you keep on passing a single prop throughout the component.
Throughout the chain of components.
Yeah, throughout the chain of components. So maybe the very first parent component you're passing a prop, and it drills down to the very maybe the nth child, maybe let's say the fourth or fifth child, where it is actually required.
So we will need to pass it way above from the highest parent to the lowest child.
Yeah.
Okay. So that will essentially cause problems when we are passing a lot of components to the child. So now we have discussed this. Let's go on to the another topic of hooks.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about React hooks?
So actually, hooks, since when they came, they have been game changer in the field of React. They changed the way we write our React. Earlier, it used to be all class based. Now it is functional, and it is since hooks came. Actually, it has become very easy to understand the code, and even easy to learn. Like for a beginner, it has been very easy to learn and reason about. So let me first explain what are hooks. So hooks are nothing but a simple function which we will call, and they will return something. But this is not a regular function. These can allow us to create states in React that we used to create in class-based components. We can create a React in functional components with the use of hooks. When hooks were not there, functional components used to be called as dumb components or presentational components, which does not have much logic. But after the introduction of hooks, we can create a state, we can manage a state with the help of use effect, like we can track if the state is changing or not. So these allow us to create a state. Not only state, it is not limited to the state. If we want to share some common logic between different component, we can create our own hook, which is like we can create in a different file, and they have a convention to use the keyword use in front of that function. So we can create a function which is a hook, and we can use the common logic also in different components. So in this case, we will not need to use higher order components when we are using functional components and hooks. So hooks have made React very easy, like easy to understand, easy to write, and yeah, the learning curve has become very, like earlier it was steep, right? Now it is flat. Now beginners can get started with React very easily when they learn React through functional based components. And all the courses now have changed to, they first used to earlier when functional components did not have hooks. So the courses used to teach class-based component, because class-based components used to be everything. We used to mainly create class-based components. But since hooks came, now functional components are taught in the courses first, and then class-based components are taught later in the courses. So, and that's how hooks have changed the way we write and reason about React.
If I can summarize this, so since the release of React hooks with the release of React 16.8 in Feb 2019, they have changed how we write React now. So can you compare these hooks with the previous lifecycle methods we had in class-based components?
Yes. Actually, earlier, let me first compare the way we create React now and in class components. So earlier we used to create a state with a keyword like this dot state, and then we used to create the state inside that, and that was a very mysterious way to update the state. So what used to happen, let's say if we create a state, and inside that state, let's say I have created two properties, name and age. I have created name, let's say my name Anurag, and age is 25 I have given. And if I have to update the state, then let's say I want to update age to 30. So by doing set state, this dot set state, I can update in class-based components. So I will in the set state I will pass only age 30, and somehow magically it will update only the age. It will not. It will keep the name state intact. It will not change that. So this is not a functional way, not very easy to reason about. Like students can, or any React developer can think like I have updated the whole state with one property, still there are two properties. But since hooks came in React, if we create the same thing, if we create one state and put name as Anurag and age as some number, let's say 25, and if we update only age, then name will be gone. So this makes more sense. Like if we want to keep the previous, then we will have to spread it. There is a different way to update the state if we want to dependent on the previous state. So we have to pass a callback function, and then we will spread everything and whatever property we want to update. So we will update like that. So this is more functional approach and more easy to reason about. And let's say if we want to compare other lifecycle hooks that we used to have, like component did mount, component did update, or component will unmount.
Other lifecycle methods.
Yes, so these are lifecycle methods that we had access inside class-based components. Now all these methods, lifecycle methods, have been replaced by use effect hook. So with the use effect hook, we can do all of these things. We can track if the state is changing with the component did update, like we used to do. A component did update. We can use it we can do that thing with use effect, and we can do whatever we used to do with component will unmount. We can pass like we can write a cleanup function inside use effect. If we return something and we return a function inside that, so that function will be called whenever our component unmounts. Let's say if we go to some other page, then our component on that page where we were previously, that component will be unmounted. So that cleanup function will run, which will act as component will unmount. Okay. So like everything has become very simple. We don't need to remember a lot of lifecycle methods. Only two hooks will do all the job.
So it essentially has combined many lifecycle methods into 2 or 3 hooks.
Yes.
Okay, and I think the elimination, or you can say reduce use of this keyword is also a benefit we had from the functional component.
Yes, actually, I forgot that thing. So actually, this was also one of the main reasons. That's why React developers, Facebook developers have moved out of the class-based components and completely switched to functional components, because this can be confusing not only for the beginners, even seasoned developers get confused while using this, because it has a lot of rules. Like in this function it will point to something else, and in other function it will point something else. In arrow functions it will point to something else. In normal function it will point to something else.
So sometimes it gets very confusing.
Yes, we have to we need to bind it. Like it was very confusing. So that was also one of the reason they introduced hooks, and now we don't need to use this keyword anymore in React.
And we are really blessed with whoever came up with this concept.
Yes. You told like who came with this concept.
Yeah, so I guess Dan Abramov,
Huh.
he actually came up with the concept. So what happened was he came up with the concept of hooks for React around, I guess, in 2018 itself.
Hmm.
And after that they acted upon it, and then the whole concept of hooks was introduced. So I think that's a very whole interesting journey that happened with respect to hooks as far, because it was a very game changer component, as you mentioned. Like even after, in I guess 2015, after the functional component was introduced, it took a lot of time for the developers to actually understand on what's going on inside these things. We are using higher order components, we are using render props and these sort of
And
things.
yeah, they totally
Right.
changed it.
Yeah,
One
but
day.
this was uh, the whenever the hooks was, like, as soon as the hooks was introduced, they completely changed on how the logic works in React. Code became much more concise, as in, okay, this it's what it's doing. Okay, we'll be able to understand that. Okay, let's say, for example, as you mentioned, use effect. Previously we had component did mount, we have component did update to understand if the dependency has been updated. Now it was simply that, okay, we have a use effect. If I just want to update it on mount, I'll pass a simple with the square brackets inside it, no dependency. But if I want to, if I want to add a dependency, I can add it. So it became much more concise, as in I will look at use effect and say, okay, this if it needs to be updated on mount, or if it needs to be updated as soon as there's a dependency change. So this changed the whole scenario on how the hooks, like how we program in React. And yeah, as you mentioned, even the learning curve become changed.
Yeah.
Okay, so for example, let's say if I'm someone that has just started with React. Previously I had to understand class components. Okay, then I
And that is
need to
not an
understand.
easy
Yeah,
journey.
that's quite a long time. Even the very thing that changed people, the team at React, they wanted people to use functional components, because one of the main advantages that comes with this is that in class-based components, every time it's rendered, right, a new object is created, and this would cause a significant issue in the performance of the application. However, in functional components, because they are mostly stateless, it actually improved the performance in this case. So that was one of the main reasons that they wanted to go towards the functional side of things. And with hooks coming into the picture, it staggered that, okay, that we need to now use functional components predominantly. So I think that was a very game changer. I mean, I guess it was introduced around October 2019, February 2019.
Right.
Yeah, in the 16.8 update.
Yeah. So, how relevant is class-based component in today's scenario?
For interviews and like class-based components they ask in interviews, and also if we like all the codes that have been written before 2019 are there and they are not gone. So there are very high chances if you join a company which is built, like whose product is built in React from long time, so they will have class-based components, so you will have to deal with that. So in order to work as a professional in React developer, you need to know higher order components, you need to know class-based component, you need to understand all of these things. And like all the new projects that are being created nowadays and even after hooks came, all those projects use functional components, but still we need to know from where we came, where we were, and from where we came, and if we encounter, we should be able to understand what is going on.
Like the React, the developer should also be backward compatible.
Yes, everyone, everything should have backward compatibility.
I mean, backward compatibility is definitely a good thing, but as you know, as soon as the class components they start to becoming obsolete sort of. So whenever we see new projects, I don't think anyone would opt for class components
Yes.
until there is an absolute necessity mentioned by the client or mentioned by the team that we have to use, a class-based component.
And that will essentially be only the case if they have a prior code base to update.
Yeah, a legacy code base. Maybe they have built something previously on class components, and the team is well aware of how class components work, but they don't have knowledge of functional components, which I think would be pretty much rare in these days because
Mm.
almost every React developer I have encountered have used mostly functional components in it. So yeah, I think it will become pretty much obsolete.
In coming few
Yes,
years.
even
Yeah.
React docs have deprecated the class-based component. If you go to that page,
Yeah.
they will first tell
Like that we have a
don't
better
create,
thing to do.
don't use class-based, use functional components. So I think it will get obsolete as time passes, but still we need to know from where we came. Like we should know at least, so that if we encounter, and in interviews you cannot go, like you cannot avoid class-based component. They will ask all the lifecycle methods.
Mhm.
They will ask higher order components. They may ask render props also. So it is good to know and understand how it used to work. But if you are creating new project, it is okay, you can get around
Avoid
it.
it.
I hope in interviews too, it becomes obsolete. That
Yeah,
we
maybe,
don't ask
because
easy
I think
components.
all the people who take interviews, they are senior people who have used
Experience.
class-based component
Yeah.
in whole their life. Like, so they are very attached to class-based components. That's why, and they will ask when like uh, people who have used functional component, they will become senior and they will start taking question. Then they will not take ask class-based components questions.
Yeah. Maybe our next set of developers wouldn't have to face the class voice component questions.
Yes. Maybe after, I think it will take at least 2-3 more years uh, to get rid of class-based components in interviews. Also, we have already gotten rid of in the projects, in the new projects, but in interviews it will take time.
Like, would you ask? Let's say if you are hiring someone, would you ask class base?
No, actually, I will not ask. I will mainly ask functional base, hooks, all these things. I will ask.
Does the
I will
concepts
not
that are
ask.
relevant in current scenario?
Yes, I will not ask.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think it's safe to say that React hooks has been popular ever since they were introduced in 2019, and they are ruling the industry still now.
Yes, actually, it is one of the main reason why React has become so popular, because they are obsessed with the developer experience. They want to improve the experience of the developer. That's why they want to make using React very easy, using and understanding React very easy. So that's why they keep pushing and pushing new updates and user-friendly things, beginner-friendly things to React. So that's why React has become so popular, because it is very easy to understand and get started with, and it is very easy to make large apps in React.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very scalable.
Scalable as well.
And the React community itself is very active, we can say.
Yes.
Every now and then we come across packages that are very useful and very based on the practical concepts.
Yeah.
And one of the benefits of React is that it is essentially a library. So we do not need to learn all the things at the same moment. We can take it as they come.
Yes,
Like-
actually, if we see the core of React, it it does only one thing, like updating the DOM. It takes care of that. We don't need to write any logic to update the DOM. So when we write JavaScript, so let's say we make any application and write 100 lines, or let's say write 100 lines of code in simply JavaScript. So 50 lines will be to manipulate the DOM, to update things on the DOM.
Yeah, exactly.
And that 50 lines of code will be like, you don't have to write if you use React. So our code will be much shorter, like we can say exactly half or even less, because React takes care of updating the DOM. And it is a library and it has one purpose, to update the DOM. and other libraries came around it. Let's say for routing, React Router DOM came, and uh, now React is taking the shape of framework with the help of Next.js, but still it is a library. We can use it without Next.js also.
Yeah.
So it is very easy and simple. Like we have to just learn state, how state works, and we can get started with React. It is very simple actually.
Since we came up with the topic of DOM, so can we briefly talk about virtual DOM and how React manages the DOM?
Yeah, sure. So actually, in order to understand the virtual DOM, first we need to understand what is DOM. So let me explain DOM in few words. So DOM is the full form of DOM is document object model. So the name itself says it is object. So DOM is the object of our whole HTML page. Whatever we write in HTML, let's say section tag, p tag, or anything parent-child relationship, that is represented in an object inside the memory of JavaScript. Whenever we write HTML, it creates a JavaScript object which has parent-child relationship. So that is DOM, and every element in the DOM, let's say if we have one H1, it will have, like, we can open the dev tools and see one element, DOM element, will have more than 200 properties on it, right? So it have lot of properties. Every element have lot of properties. So DOM itself is a very heavy thing, and React. So if React directly wants to update the DOM, it will be very difficult for React to compare which property have changed.
It will be a costly process.
So React, what it does is it creates a virtual DOM. They call it virtual DOM, but it is it sounds very fancy, but it is also an object because DOM is also an object.
Everything is an object. In case of
Everything
JavaScript.
is an object in JavaScript. So like virtual DOM is also an object with like we can see in the console also. Like if we try to like we can see in the console what is virtual DOM. It is just an object parent-child relationship with less properties. Like it will have 7-8 properties, which are very necessary for which are the basic properties
for an element to exist.
So it becomes very easy for React to compare less properties, and so what it does, it keeps the copy of previous DOM and something updated. So it will compare its virtual DOM, like which property has been updated, and then it will figure out which exact property or which exact DOM node or which exact element we need to update on the real DOM. So for the algorithm to perform faster, it uses the virtual DOM so that it does not have to go through all the properties that is there in the real DOM. So it makes updating the DOM very fast. So that's what a virtual DOM is.
I mean, it's a very simple concept, right? You look for the changes that is happening in the DOM. Okay, you compare them and then you update accordingly. So this becomes very performance efficient and it optimizes the whole process. As in, you're not updating the whole page all at once. Instead, you are updating only the things that needs to update. So
and to identify those elements, the React uses diffing algorithm.
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
that
is
I
just a
wanted to
fancy
speak
word.
about because this is asked in the interviews, and we should know, like, in order to compare the old virtual DOM and updated virtual DOM, there is an algorithm. We call it diffing algorithm of React. It figures out which exact DOM node is changed, and then it compares, like it has already compared, and then it directly updates the DOM after performing the diffing algorithm. And this whole process, of applying the diffing algorithm and updating on the DOM is called reconciliation. This process, like many times in interviews, people ask what is a reconciliation. So we should know what is the reconciliation. Even if I take interview, I may also ask what is reconciliation. So this is the whole process that is called reconciliation.
So till now we have discussed so many things. So keeping the time constraint in mind, let's move on to our next topic, that is React Suspense and Concurrent Mode.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a very interesting feature that was introduced in React 18. So, concurrent mode, basically, what happens, I think, it has been in talks from October, I guess, 2015. So, according to someone I checked recently, and it took 2,161 days for this feature to actually be stable and be available to everyone as well. So what is basically concurrent mode, right? I mean, they initially tried to make this change, as in they tried introducing various algorithms, they tried various methods. But as we know, like JavaScript, it goes on in a linear line. Like once this is done, then I'll go and so on. But this uh, this very particular feature in JavaScript, it became a hurdle in React because they needed to do a lot of things all at once. Let's say, for example, if I'm rendering a UI, I cannot just render the header and then the page and then so on. I need to render a lot of things all at once. Uh, Now this came while they were trying to overcome these issues. The very first issue that they needed to overcome was optimizing the CPU performance. For example, if you are rendering a lot of things all at once, it also puts a lot of strain on the CPU. So the browser would hang itself. And if you have, let's say, maybe 10 or 11 tabs in the background in Chrome, you are doomed forever. So that is one of the issues that they had to overcome before that. The second issue was, let's say, even if I'm making it concurrent, right? I need to first prioritize what needs to be done, like what needs to be prioritized. Like, do I need to prioritize a video streaming? Do I need to prioritize the changes that were happening? Maybe let's say if I the comments that are happening, or do I need to prioritize the chat? I mean, I needed to know to which component do I give a priority to. So these were the issues that they needed to overcome to actually make a stable concurrent mode. Now, how did they, like, even if there were these issues, how did they overcome it, right? I mean, they needed at some point when hooks were introduced, it became much easier. So, what they were doing is that, let's say, for example, if I have multiple UI, a batch process was happening. So, whenever I needed to update UI components, the batch would go like I can update all of them at once. So instead of doing it every single time, like instead of passing it, telling the CPU that do it each and every second, and so they would pass it in a batch. They would send it at once, and it would update and render the same. So this helped to minimize the CPU usage the CPU usage issue that we had. So I think concurrent mode, when it was finally introduced in 18, it was introduced with the help of various features, as it use deferred value. So, for example, if you want to, the users, while they're coming to a page, they need to see that, okay, there is some UI function that is happening, right? So they will render the UI first, and then the necessary components, data that are available. So you can use deferred value for rendering the data on lower priority, that you can give a higher priority to the UI and so on. So one of the very things, I mean, I think we earlier discussed regarding the async data loading, right? So what happens in async data loading is that uh, we have a data that is coming in. So based on that, we are doing conditional rendering over here, as in we are showing the loading skeleton for each and every component and so on. But what happens in this concurrent mode is that you can actually delay by using, as a developer, you can delay that, okay, I can add a suspense over it, and till the data is coming through, I can show a fallback UI. Okay. And by this, I have a control on the component as well as the data. Earlier, I only had control over the data, that, okay, until the data comes in, I'll just show up a loading skeleton or so on. So this way, I can maybe, if I'm rendering something, let's say I have a video streaming site, right, where maybe like YouTube, and there are comments that are there and so on. If you're loading such a page, the very first thing that a user should come across is the video itself. Okay, a high priority should be given to that component.
Right.
Let's say there are comments or maybe recommendations. All this can be rendered a little bit late.
Yeah.
Right. So I can give a higher priority to the video component, and I can add a suspense on comments, on the recommendations. So they will be rendered, but there will be a delay in them.
Okay, so suspense essentially suspends the lower priority components.
Exactly. I mean, that's well put.
Okay, so what are your thoughts, Anurag, on this?
Yes, like exactly whatever Nischit told, it is that is how suspense and async rendering works. And async rendering and concurrent mode or concurrent rendering, React team itself has very doubt on naming these things. So initially they named it async rendering, and then they renamed it to concurrent mode or something. Now the final name that they have come up with, concurrent features. They don't call it async rendering or concurrent rendering or concurrent mode. They call it concurrent feature. So with the concurrent feature, they have provided two hooks that we can use. There is one used deferred value, and one is used transition. So what we can do with this, we would have obviously seen in our phones. If we type like if phone is like low end device, if we type something, after 2-3 seconds something will come, like immediately all the text will come. So the same problem can happen with the React also. So async features, not async features, concurrent features solve that problem. So why that happens is because our CPU is less power, or our application is focusing on something else, or on doing something else. So let's say if we have to render a lot of let's say list items, and if we want to type something, let's say, and search and then load. So if let's say user types and you want to immediately fetch something and want to show everything, so React does not know which is higher priority and which is a lower priority thing. So actually in this case what should happen, first React should let the user type and then it should search. But by default React, what it does,
It processes everything in parallel.
it gives everything the same priority, and it batches the update, and it will render that thing whatever we are typing whenever the list is rendered. Like if we don't tell the priority that this has less priority, the list that is rendering and the input that we are typing, so it will render both things at the same time. So when the list will come at that time, it will be immediately typed. But with the use transition hook, or we can use deferred value, we can use any one of those, and we can tell like this rendering list is less priority. So it will, in this case, it will not patch the update. It will render two times. It will first render the input field whatever user have typed, and then it will render the list. So in this case, it does not matter how computational, how like computation heavy things we are performing. That heavy thing will happen later, because if user is typing, he should get the feedback that he is typing. Otherwise, that is not a good experience. So with concurrent features, we can do that. Like that is very good for improving the performance of our application. So that's what my take on this.
So React Suspense and Concurrent Mode, they are two different things. So how can a beginner differentiate between the two?
Okay. So React concurrent mode feature, right? When it was introduced, React suspense is a part of it.
Okay.
Okay. So as in I can say it's an implementation of the React concurrent feature. So for example, let's say if I want to, as I mentioned previously, if I want to delay the comment section of the video streaming site. I can put it on a low priority using Suspense. Okay. So one thing is that in React, whenever the React concurrent feature was introduced, we can delay any of the any of the component rendering, but it cannot be put on a higher node. As in, you cannot give anyone a higher priority, but you can lower priorities of components over here.
Okay. So we can decide like which should be done after which, but we cannot promote something up. We can promote something more. Devote the priority of the
Yeah.
components.
You can demote any of the components. So like you can put it on a low priority. So what this tells the browser or the rendering application is that delay, like put the high components, which are whichever components you have not put on a Suspense, right? They would be rendered on a higher priority.
Okay.
That the person who that the rendering application would be know that okay, I need to render all these things. This can maybe I can
This
hold
can
them.
wait.
Yeah, this can wait. I can provide them
But
resources.
these are the priority tasks.
Yeah, so it will happen. I mean, the rendering would also happen for the lower priority components, but it would happen on a lower node. As in, it most of the resources would be consumed by the other components which are not on Suspense, right? So this would actually, let's say, I mean, an example would be for a blog. If you're going to a blog, the very first thing that you need is that you're reading an article.
Yeah.
Right, so all the words that are there, the article itself, it needs to be on a higher node. Right, but the images, maybe it would only enhance your experience.
Images, comments, dislikes, all these things will be low priority tasks.
Yeah, and they can be loaded with a delay, and it would actually give the user a better experience. As in, you'll be going through the article, and then when you'll be going through maybe the comments, or maybe you'll be going through the recommendations, the images, and so on. Okay, so this would enhance the user experience as well.
That's fascinating, Nischit. These advancements in React are truly game changing. Unfortunately, we have ran out of time today. So I would like to thank our guests, Anurag and Nischit, for giving us their expertise on the React.
Thank you so much, Shreya, for having me here. I had really great experience sharing my thoughts and knowledge on React. And thank you to the GeekyAnts team for hosting me here. And yeah, I had a really great experience.
And thank you, Shreya. I mean, it was a very wonderful session. And also thank you, Anurag. I mean, some of the insights that you gave and the stories that you told about React and so on. It was very interesting to me.
So I would also like to thank our lovely audience. So until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep coding.